This is probably going to be one of the hardest ones that I've ever done. This is a true story. It's something that happened to me. It's going to get very, very dark, and it's a ghost story. This is a dark story, and I'm going to get through it with a dark stout. If you want to see how I make a cake using this as the main ingredient, click on the card at the end of this video and I'll show you just how to do that. So welcome along to another Nick's Notorious narrative. This has been a difficult story for me to approach. It's a story with an ending that you won't expect. It's taken months of compiling footage, investigative research, and also running a few interviews as well. So let's get straight into it. So you might remember, if you are a returning customer, in my very first video I spoke about how I lived in a place called Evans Bay, and that was in the top flat of an old wooden house. Now in that story I told you how I lived in the top flat with my wife, my friend Tama, and his girlfriend Chantal. But before we all lived together, my wife and I actually lived in the downstairs flat, and that's when it all started. It wasn't immediately easy to depict all the little things that started happening. Maybe a creaky floorboard upstairs when there was actually nobody home to stand on it. Or it could potentially be the bathroom door slamming shut when there were no windows open. The first time that I noticed something that gave me reason to pause was one morning when Mia got up to go to work. Quite often it would happen that she would get to the bottom of the cable car and have already missed her bus, so she would come back up and wake me to take her to work. On that morning I heard a voice, clear as day, shout out to me to wake up. Half asleep, I stumbled out of bed, started getting dressed, and by the time I'd finished going to the bathroom I came out and the house was empty. So I rang Mia, only to find that she was already at work and hadn't come back to the house at all. And I know you can chalk it down to me being half asleep, and it could have been half a dream, but I know what I felt and know what I heard, and on that day I got woken up by something. When these things start to happen, your mind does something where it rationalizes in the light of day, and it casts those things out. It was just your imagination or a waking dream. Only in the deep shadows of night do those doubts start creeping back, and you start to truly ask yourself what it was that you saw. So a few months after that event, we found ourselves living upstairs. Tama and Chantal needed a place to live, so we all decided to move in together. And our vacated flat downstairs was then occupied by a nice couple. The guy's name was Dan. He was into IT, good with computers. His girlfriend's name escapes me, but she was into McDonald's in a big way. A big way. For me, I worked evenings in a theatre, so quite often I'd have the entire flat to myself, with Tama and Chantal being out and my wife being at work. I'd still hear them just outside my door. But when I opened the door to see why they were home, there was no one there. I tried to tell myself that it was anything else. Maybe it was the neighbours downstairs. Maybe it was just the drafty old flat. But my roommate Tama found something that was harder to ignore. If you recall, he worked at the local supermarket night shifts. One evening he returned home quite late, and the first thing he did when he got home was he burst straight into our room. Now I half expected him to have found another dog, but instead he told us what he'd actually seen. This particular night he saw somebody waiting for him at the top of the cable car, and what was waiting for him was a little girl. Now, just on the cable car, you can't stop it once it's going. There's a button, it's a radio signal, and you have to be pretty close to the terminal to actually have it work. So Tama had no choice but to sort of wait in the cable car. He chose not to look at what he saw. When he got to the top, it was gone. Now the optimistic in me tries to dismiss this as potentially just some poor lost wandering soul. But the second apparition was by far the more sinister of the two, and we would later find out that it was perhaps the key to this whole series of peculiar events. Now, I was lucky enough in Christmas of 2016 to actually meet up with Tama and his young family and have a chat about that year that we spent in that house and the things that happened to him this particular night. So, rather than me tell you, I'm going to pass the reins over to Tama so you can hear it firsthand, what he saw and what he experienced.
Oh fuck that one. No, you see that you block things out for a reason. I don't want to know. I don't want to talk about that. Are you serious?
Yeah.
The particular scary girl who had the knife and scared the shit out of me.
She had a knife?
Because there was the little girl that I saw out the window, and that scared the shit out of me. And I forever cannot look out the window at little girls, which is going to my profession. I do remember coming home that night, and I do remember, I think it was because of that particular night I started using the stairs, especially, and running up them, because you could run a lot faster than cable car coming down. I remember, see, because it's a real pain in the ass. I remember seeing this type of shadow thing twice. I remember seeing it once down there, and I remember seeing it once in another part or area of the house. It was in the corner with all the rubbish, which is a corner that I didn't particularly use because I didn't do rubbish. And when I was hopping in the cable car, especially because it's, you know, when you get yourself in a situation when you truly think it's a true, real, supernatural scenario, and I'm sure many people have probably been here. And I always thought I'd be like a real hard cunt. I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna fight whatever that thing is. And I remember noticing the shadow and quite literally just ignoring it. So like, I remember being in the corner, and as I was waiting for the cable car, I just turned slightly, so I didn't have to see. I could just see it obviously because I was scared enough that it would come at me. And I remember the shadow being in the corner. I remember just waiting. It was like the calm before the storm, and I thought, if it moves, I'll just die on the spot and not really have to worry about running, I suppose. No, I was so scared, I was like coiled spring mode and it being in the corner. And the cable car came down, calmly hopped in, calmly did the latch, and I remember as I was going up, right on the cusp of the turn, I remember looking down at it, and it moved. So that sort of scared the shit out of me. And the running down the street part, I don't know if it went left or right. Did I tell you if it went left or right?
I think you told me that you saw it exit the gate, so you saw
yes.
the gate.
Yeah, that's right. Because I also never shut the gate properly, and I remember it latching, hearing the sound of the latch. But I must have been scared enough as well to come and tell you, because normally I just cry in corners when I get scared. Yeah, you just kind of feel the eyes, don't you?
Yeah.
Feel the eyes, and I do remember, you know, our backyard as well. The second time I saw it was when I was in the kitchen. It was I mean, because I remember these certain events. I dare say it was around the time I threw that burning pie at you. I dare say, not that night, but another time in that area, because I remember like being constant events, I suppose, the birthdays and stuff. And it was when we had the paddling pool as well. I used to wear that paddling pool all the time, so I went out there. So I went out there and I waded the paddling pool, and I can't recall if it was before after this particular downstairs one, which I probably never wanted to remember again. And I remember it being movement up in the top area, and again, shadow movement, like it was not a physical thing. And I was brave enough, I suppose, at the time that I kind of went up the stairs to have a look, but then scared enough that, you know, I like I say, ran and cried.
So we found ourselves faced with a real problem, because either we chose to trust 100% what Tama was saying, or we get on with our lives and ignore it. And after a brief attempted seance where all we really did was end up hiring out a couple of porn movies and eating ice cream, that's actually what we did. We went with the latter. Tama and Shintao, they actually soon found out that they were pregnant with their first son, the older brother of the young gentleman you saw in the video just moments ago. And Mia and I, we ended up moving across town after a brief falling out with the crook of a landlord who owned the cursed house. This is the key for it. I still have it. I was meant to give it back to him, but I ended up in a yelling fit with him when I went to settle and get the bond back. So yeah. 196 Evans Bay Parade. You guys have got some problems, right? I'm not gonna lie, you got some problems. You got ghouls up the wazoo. You got a shit of a landlord if he still owns the place, and now you got the possibility of a home invasion. Alright. I'm kidding, I'm not going back there. It's fucking way too scary. So after a brief tribunal meeting with Mr. Patel, I severed ties with that house entirely. I did my best not to think about it ever again. And it was probably a good 2 years before the house actually crossed my mind again. I was sitting at home in my flat. We'd just purchased this house here that we're in. So this was about 7 years ago. And I think my daughter must have been about 2 months old. It would have been April of 2010. And just had the news on. I had my newborn daughter sitting on my lap, just hardly watching it, hardly paying attention. I was in a really positive place in my life. Winds of change had come over me. That's why it was really weird to suddenly see on the news a face from my past. It took me a while to register, but then I was looking at her. Is that Dan on the TV? From 196B Evans Bay Parade, the downstairs neighbour guy, the guy that was into IT and always bought his girlfriend McDonald's up the cable car. Not that I watched them come up the cable car very often, it was just one thing I noticed. So, out of curiosity, I picked up the remote and turned up the volume, and this is the unfortunate story that I saw.
A Wellington man who organised an international child pornography ring continued to offend, even after he'd been caught by police. Daniel Moore was arrested in 2007 after a joint operation run by the United States Department of Homeland Security, New Zealand Police and Internal Affairs. As Rachel Morton reports, they managed to use him as bait.
This is the man the US Secret Service tracked to the other side of the world. Daniel Moore, who'd already served jail for child pornography, was running one of the most sophisticated child porn operations they'd come across, all managed out of the 32-year-old's Wellington bedroom.
Moore and others like him are directly responsible for the miserable lives that the children depicted in the pictures he had live. Without end users like him, there would be no market.
Moore used a system called Internet Relay Chat. It operates away from the general internet and can only be accessed by invitation. He had a surveillance system set up around his home so he could be alerted to any raid and unplug his computer in time. The hard drive was fully encrypted, which meant the data on the drive could only be accessed if it was connected and running. Had the drive been unplugged, all of the data would have been lost. But police were too quick. They burst in and managed to drag him from his computer before he could disconnect. And then for 5 days, police and internal affairs inspectors kept up the pretense of being Moore and trapped other international pedophiles. One in the United States was jailed for 18 years.
The images depicted girls aged from 4 to 14 in a full range of activities, including sexual posing, sexual activity with children, sexual activity with adults and with animals.
Moore was let out on bail but was arrested again in January 2009 after following a woman along Oriental Parade and filming up her skirt. As a result of that, his laptop and PC were seized.
Some 8,300 images of pre-pubescent girls ranging in age from infants to 14 were found.
Moore told police he just couldn't help his behaviour. He would have been sentenced to 7 years jail but only received 4.5 because he pleaded guilty and is taking part in counselling. Rachel Morton, 3 News.
So, within only probably a few minutes after seeing this story, things started to fall into place for me. I messaged Tama, and I'm pretty sure that things would have fallen into place with him too.
Holy shit.
Did you not? Did you not make that connection?
No? Holy fuck.
Well, okay, maybe not, but once he had all the facts, it was pretty easy to put it together.
Yeah.
Oh, because the dude below us.
Yeah.
Fuck. Man, honestly, I have really blocked this stuff out. Like, the only things I remember from Wellington are cable car, sitting on the roof with you guys. On the roof? Did we sit on the roof? On the bottom part? On a couch or something?
So you got Dan, our unseemly neighbour. He was into IT, good with computers, who we thought we knew him well enough.
This is the man the US Secret Service tracked to the other side of the world.
We spoke to him a couple of times, got some advice from him about computers.
Remember, we knew that he was doing it though, because he told us about Trade Me, and he'd go, yeah, whenever I want something to Trade Me, I should bombard the person the iPad, and then I'd win the thing really cheap.
I think we made that. He told us about these bots and what they could do, and that was what we used to say to rationalise it. Like, oh, so if you're bidding on trading, you could chat.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because
he was like, yeah, I guess you could use it for that.
Actually, now that you say that, he was really cool. You know what? Honestly, though, I admired that guy. He was cool though, because I thought as soon as he told us about those attacks, I thought, well, fuck, that's pretty neat. Isn't it? Like, you could do the trade me stuff. You could, I don't know, you could get some cheap deals somewhere.
Cheap deals?
Cheap.
Oh, right, I thought we want some sheep.
You know, did you hear that? Yeah, that was a genuine shit.
That was good.
We subleased our garage to him. This is his wrench from the garage. He left it behind with a few other things, so I scored some tools. He did this? Like, fuck. After getting over the shock of that, suddenly all these strange events started to fall into place. The dark figure in the courtyard and in the backyard, it wasn't some vengeful poltergeist.
We were under surveillance that entire time. That whole house was under surveillance by police.
It was more likely that it was some police officer trying to find evidence in our rubbish.
Imagine what if it was a police officer, like, I am snapped, like, he caught me in the act, like, condom in the hand, like,
I imagine him eating it for some reason.
And then you just go,
I was so scared. Oh my god.
So after putting together this tapestry of all these unanswered questions, there was always one loose end. There was always one thing that just didn't fit in. And that was the little girl waiting at the top of the cable car, waiting to go home. Then who was she? Was Dad fairly trialed? Did they actually find out everything there was to know about him before they took him to court? Did they really discover all of his secrets when they seized his PC? Or were there darker stories there? Things that none of us could have imagined that he would do. Things that just haven't yet come to light. Because the universe is a weird thing. Karma comes to those who deserve it. And that's for the good and the bad. I think it's so strange that the universe chose to show me this information when it did. When it would most affect me. You know, I might have just thought that's fucked if I found out at the time. But I found out 2 months after having my firstborn child. And that was a lot more of an impact to me. Having her sitting in my lap and finding out this person I knew was capable of something like that. That was unreal. That was unreal. And I think that's enough for one night. I'm getting chills telling the story, and it has nothing to do with this cold, dark room. So I know I normally make these as a comedy thing, so I'd like to end this video on a slightly lighter note. I know that might seem insensitive to suddenly jump from what we were just talking about to suddenly talk to something a lot lighter, but I need to do it to save my sanity, so please excuse me. But this is a benefit for you as well, because there are preventatives that you can take, so that if you ever find yourself in a situation like that, you can actually identify it at the time and take the necessary action, whether that is calling the police or getting a iron rod and beating somebody with it. So that's good. The preventative is, it's this cool little device I got, and it's called a pedometer. And what it does, I think, I haven't read the instructions, is that it somehow senses intentions or thoughts, perhaps, of people around you, and it compiles that information, and then it relays that information or that data onto this little electronic display, and I'm guessing it just tells you how many pedophiles are around you at any given point. So I've been wearing this today. It's been really helpful. You know, I've almost forgot it was there. Taking a look at it now though, we walked past somewhere over 3,500 pedophiles, so that's a bit concerning. That's a bit much. I did walk past a Catholic church earlier, so there's that. Alright, I didn't actually write ending to the script now that I'm looking at it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just chuck it back over to the interview with Tama, and hopefully there's something there that will wind this whole thing up.
You know what? Before we started this, I didn't ask if my heel was alright. Just realised the whole thing, it could be out of whack.
I thought that you were about to say something really profound that I could use as the end.
Well, no, because now I'm worried that we'll have to do it over your head.
No, that's good.
How's my hair, buddy? How's my hair?